music video was the song Ain't Gonna Let Nobody, sung by the Howard University's gospel choir, Kamala Harris's alma mater. This old spiritual was first introduced in Georgia by Reverend Ralph Abernathy during the summer of 1962, when mass arrests and civil rights demonstrations were taking place all over. Before Ain't Gonna Let Nobody was used in the civil rights movement, the song was a spiritual called Don't You Let Nobody Turn You Around, and was printed with music in Clarence Cameron White's 1927 40 Negro Spirituals. This particular clip is one of the many beautiful music videos provided by our Reverend Lee Marie to the worship committee. Welcome to all. It's a gorgeous spring day outside. My name is Rachel Daniels, and I am your worship associate. This is the Sunday after the Climate Summit, Earth Day, and after the Derek Chauvin guilty verdict. It's also after the UU Vigil that we had on Wednesday, which was held to help us process our feelings about the verdict. Like most, if not all of us here, I was profoundly relieved with the verdict. And then I was shocked when the prosecution requested that Chauvin's bail be revoked and he be taken into custody. I'm like, what? He's out on bail? I mean, he committed murder that was witnessed all around the world, and he was out on bail. That part had previously slipped by me. The violence against people of color continues. One verdict doesn't eliminate the systemic racism or injustice in this country, but I really think we're at a turning point now. The protests and the verdict and cell phone cameras show that we are not, as a country, totally indifferent to the police violence against people of color, and police officers can and should be held accountable. This is our fourth Sunday, which is our Social Justice Sunday. We have a social justice minister, Reverend Lee Marie Sanchez, who is at the pulpit at least one Sunday a month and works with all of us extensively throughout the month, joining us for many services, Zoom at noon. Lee Marie works with the board, with the worship committee. She does pastoral care, and she brings us social justice issues, which help us to better ourselves in our community. And she does all this while being part-time. No worship service would be possible without our worship committee. Pam Floodman's wonderful skills and work to assure the brilliant techs, speakers, worship associates, music director, and the Reverend Lee Marie, and the announcements on Facebook, and all of you who participate come together for this beautifully baked Sunday experience. When I was around 10 years old, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 had just been passed. We were living in Anaheim. My father had been part of the Communist Party when he was in college, and my mother, a liberal Jew, was very active in politics. We were part of the UU Church in Anaheim, and we didn't have computers back then. My mother would bring home stacks of flyers from the UU Church that we had to fold, stuff envelopes, put addresses on, and there was always a number of causes, protests, marches. I remember asking my father one day what we owe to people of color, although back then I probably said Negroes, but I wanted to know, what do we owe? And my father told me that we were not in debt to any single person, but we, as part of the society and as individuals, we owe to fight for equality and justice for all people of color, and we owe it to ourselves. There's a little story about a farmer who grew excellent quality corn, and no, this is not going to be a Monsanto story. He grew the best corn in the area. The farmer shared his prize-winning seed corn with his neighbors so that they too could grow the best corn. When he was asked how he could afford to share his best seed corn with his neighbors, the farmer replied, "Their success is my success. The wind picks up pollen from the ripening corn and swirls it from my field to their field, from their field to my field. And if I'm to grow good corn, I must help my neighbors grow good corn too." And that's the same with our lives. Those who want to live meaningfully and have justice must help enrich the lives and fight for equality for all others. The welfare of each of us is bound up with the welfare of all. We are connected, and a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all is possible if we share the good corn seed with each other. Today, we welcome back our speaker, Reverend Rayna Hamre. Reverend Rayna will inspire us with her sermon on paying our respects to Viola Liuzzo and Reverend James Reeb, and learning more about their work in 1965 in Selma, when they lost their lives in separate occurrences for speaking out against the brutal racism and ugly segregation in the South. Both were Unitarian Universalists. Reverend Rayna is an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister who serves as the affiliated community minister at Tapestry. Reverend Rayna holds a master's degree in history, in addition to her Master's of Divinity degree. She has served on the leadership team for Tapestry's Welcoming Neighbors Home and is currently leading the first sessions of the UU History curriculum, Faith Like a River. Reverend Rayna is a member of the Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice, CLU, in Orange County. She lives with her husband, Steve, also a longtime UU, and her cat, BB, and they live in Huntington Beach. In the e-blast announcing this service, there's a photo of Reverend Rayna at a counter-protest of the KKK rally that was held in Huntington Beach just a few weeks ago. Reverend Rayna participated in the counter-protest and is not only a historian and a minister, she is also a warrior for human dignity. I think all of our 7 principles are applicable to today's service, but the principles that stand out to me the most are our first principle, belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and also our 6th principle, having a goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Thank you, Reverend Rayna, for being with us today. And you know what I just realized? I forgot to bring my candle for lighting the chalice. But Don, I think Reverend Rayna has one. Will you highlight Reverend Rayna as she lights hers? Thank you. Everywhere on Sunday mornings, Unitarians light the chalice. Please grab a candle to light at home if you have one nearby. Our chalice lighting words are from the International Council of Unitarians and Universalists website. The light of the sun does not lift the shadows that have fallen on humanity the world over. We relight our chalice flame to reignite a spirit of radical optimism, knowing it takes us all living in a way that matters to dispel those who would divide us. All manner of things will be well if we work to make them well. May our free religious communities embody the right relationships to bring justice and love to our world so desperately in need. The chalice represents illumination to the world that we are called upon to serve with love and justice. Our centering thought this morning is from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from a letter from Birmingham jail. Please read along from home. The words will be on your screen. In any nonviolent campaign, there are 4 basic steps. Collection of the facts to determine whether injustices exist. Negotiation. Self-purification, and direct action. Later in our virtual cafe, I want to ask the Reverend about the self-purification step, but that will be later after our service. Our opening hymn this morning is number 368, and we turn to our very talented music director, Carole, and thanks to Don for our opening hymn, number 368. Now let us sing. Pam will place the words into a chat message so you can sing along at home, even though you're still muted.
Good morning, everyone. We're now going to sing together. Now let us sing. Sing to the power of faith within. Sing to the power of faith within. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Sing to the power of faith within. Sing to the power of hope within. Sing to the power of hope within. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Sing to the power of hope within. Sing to the power of love within. Sing to the power of love within. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Sing to the power of love within. Sing to the power of joy within. Sing to the power of joy within. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Sing to the power of joy within. Sing to the power of joy within.
Thank you, Carole and Don. That's a great, lively, heart-opening song for us. Now we'll take a moment to remind ourselves why we come together as a community. There is a short affirmation that we'll all read together. Please unmute yourselves. It'll be fun, and I always love hearing all our voices, and sometimes we even seem to be reading together. The affirmation will be on your screens. May we be reminded
here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service, altar of humanity.
May we know once again
that we are
not
isolated beings,
but
connected
in mystery and miracle, the universe,
to this community,
and to each other.
Now we'll go to Reverend Rayna for our call to worship.
Good morning. It is just wonderful to be here again. So good to see some new faces and familiar faces. A big thanks to Reverend Lee Marie for inviting me to come back, and to Pam, to Patrick and Rachel and Dawn and everybody who helped put together this wonderful morning where we can be together. Our call to worship is number 470 by Reverend Leonard Mason. We affirm the unfailing renewal of life. Rising from the earth and reaching for the sun, all living creatures shall fulfill themselves. We affirm the steady growth of human companionship. Rising from ancient cradles and reaching for the stars, people the world over shall see the ways of understanding. We affirm a continuing hope that out of every tragedy, the spirits of individuals shall rise to build a better world. Blessed be.
Thank you. Now is the time of our service where we pause the recording, and it's your travels, your Mother Day plans, the closeness of family, new love. I've never seen you look better, Michael. And nice to meet you, T. And gosh, family celebrations. It feels like spring, huh? Like everything coming to life with so much going on. We're going to go to our, I put it over here, to our offertory now. And I'm wearing on my candy wrapper a Black Lives Matter button. And I have another one because I wanted to show you how rusted out the back of it is. I bought these from Jan Meslin at our fellowship, And it was maybe 5 to 7 years ago. It was either a service or a Saturday event on policing and prison reform. It was a long time ago, and I don't know if Helen remembers, because I think Helen was part of the Social Action Committee back then. Sorry, if you hear background noise, that's my water going. It was a long time ago, and we knew back then that Black Lives Matter was a movement to join, and that was back then. So being part of this community and being connected to what matters is why we come together, and your donations make it happen. There are many ways to share good corn seed with each other and to help bend the arc of the moral universe towards justice. And one of those ways is to give financial support. We have a slide up that shows ways to donate to the UUFLB. The same information that you see on your screen now, it was sent to you in an email notice about the service. You can take a check, mail it, or you could do it electronically, and you can make it and make us happen. Now, Reverend Rayna will lead us in prayer, meditation, reflection, and then into the video clip interview and the sermon.
The quote this morning for our prayer and meditation is from the Reverend Leslie Takahashi, who I had the privilege to study with at our Meadville Lombard Theological School. And she writes some beautiful prayers and reflections. So if you could join me in that spirit of prayer reflection for a moment. Here in this place of peace, may we find hope. Here in this place of connection, may we find life-giving connection. Here in this place of rest, let the unrest of our hearts turn us toward justice. Here in this place made sacred by memories of connection, let us each feel ourselves part of the new that grows from the old in the spiraling unity of the years. And if you could hold those words as we watch these two short videos. Thanks. Sounds like we're having a little trouble with the sound portion of the video.
Yeah, we did not test this yesterday. I'm sorry. But we will do it again. We'll just have to do it a little different this time.
Okay. I think we are all used to being on Zoom, and maybe it's not perfect every single time. Don, maybe we should skip ahead to the second video. And I can attest the song that was planned was lovely, and I know you'll enjoy it on a different morning.
I mean, that's it. She left a legacy of, for one, standing up for what you believe in. Don't be afraid. Just stand up for what you believe in. And that if you do stand up for what you believe in, while you might lose your life, you'll gain a victory. And you can gain a victory if you pull together.
Right.
Stand as one and do what you need to do.
Yeah, we got an unwanted visitor here.
I know.
Sorry. Well,
I
no.
know. It was
Maybe
kind of-
that's signaled from your mom. Maybe
Yeah,
that,
right,
hey, you're leaving
time's
something
over.
out, so
Yeah,
I'll give you
yeah.
a chance, whatever. But her passing, the years that followed were not easy for the family. I mean, how could they have been easy? That's kind of a silly observation, but this was the loss of your mom, anybody's mom, but in the way that she left you and in the scorn that was heaped upon her.
It was she didn't just lose her. She was replaced with all this horror, really, the undercover, the smear campaign, the trials, the acquittals, the response of the whole United States. There was a lot of good, but when you're the age that we were, it's the pain of the hatred and things that are coming your way that really you feel. But I have to tell you that now, almost 50 years later, I have had one of the richest, most rewarding lives that any woman could ask for, or any man for that matter, because of who my mother was. And people said that she didn't love us, she abandoned us. But every day, when I'm here in Little Rock and I meet people here, Robin, I'm friends with Joanne Bland and stuff, I feel my mother's love. And I'm thrilled to be her daughter and thrilled to have had the life I have had.
Another sister who could not be with us had a remarkable moment when one of the three who was convicted, they came face to face many years later. Who wants to tell that story?
I actually was there. And Eugene Thomas, the driver of the car, came up and asked us when we were breaking for lunch. He said, I don't expect you guys to say yes, but I would love to talk to you. Can I he said, can I talk to you a minute? We said, well, we're on our way to lunch. Why don't you come with us? And he was really shocked, that we would ask. And so we went across the street and sat down at this cafe. And he had tears in his eyes, and he was crying. And he said, I'm an old man now. He said, I'm dying of cancer. And he said, he looked at me and he said, Sally, you were 6 years old. He said, how can I ever, ever ask you to forgive me for taking your mama away? And I just gave him a hug and I said, you know what? My mom would want me to forgive you. And I told him I forgave him and gave him a hug, and I believed him. I looked in his eyes and I knew he was sorry. Whereas I looked in Collie Leroy Wilkins' eyes on the monitor, and that man was never sorry. But Eugene Thomas was a changed man. I really believe that.
Thanks to all of you.
Thank
you
you
for your
very
story.
much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the children of Viola Liuzzo. See you next time.
That interview had a very profound impact on me, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that towards the end. But it just was amazing to me to hear these people. There are certain dates that get etched into our memories, a family member's birthday, an anniversary, the date of a joyful or a sad event in our lives. And I now have one more date I will never forget imprinted on my memory. On April 11th, 2021, the day that the Ku Klux Klan called for radicalized right-wing groups to gather in the town where I live, Huntington Beach. I have never thought of myself as an intensely tribal person, but an inner voice when I heard the news calling together these hate groups in my town said, "This is so wrong. I need to act." This kind of ugly hate, unchallenged, has no place in Huntington Beach. With a long Klan history in both Orange County and Huntington Beach, our town continues to be a focal point for a few racist hate groups. I knew within myself that it is past time for the citizens of Huntington Beach to change the narrative around our city. I'm so pleased that the City Council and other organizations immediately put out statements denouncing racism. I've just joined the Interfaith Council and I was privileged to assist in creating one of those statements, denouncing hate and embracing diversity. But writing a statement was simply not going to be enough for me and my husband. The morning I delivered the sermon you're going to hear today at Tapestry UU on March 28th, the first KKK flyers were being dropped off in Newport Beach. As I tell you today the story of Viola Liuzzo and James Reeb being murdered in Selma, Alabama by the KKK in 1965, I hope you can better understand the deep and horrific irony as Unitarian Universalists in this sad coincidence. As fellow UUs, I hope you'll understand why my husband and I went to the counter protest in Black Lives Huntington Beach gathering on April 11th. The white left was advising people not to go, deeming it too risky. Afterwards, we who gathered physically at the pier on that day were criticized by the white liberal left and much of the media. We were accused of actually encouraging the racist groups by participating on April 11th. Reading many articles about the event and talking to people who were accusative in online forums, I was infuriated. And I had another word besides infuriated written down, but I changed it. Probably a word a minister wouldn't use. In his piece, White Body Supremacy, writer and activist Resmaa Menachemen tells us on our own UUA worship webpage that as an African American, for most of our history, the white body has had full and unfettered access to every part of my body. Every access point, every idea, every understanding. The white body has had full and unfettered access. That's not just a problem for me, that's also a problem for white folks, because it means that they expect my deference. When it doesn't happen, something happens inside of them, and that is not work I can do. Menachemen continues, and so for me, this lens of racial healing starts with very tough centered interrogation on what we're actually dealing with. Not this kumbaya, pie in the sky, let's just all get along unity stuff. That's dead. I like that white people are nice to me. Don't spit in my food, don't slap me upside the head, and don't shoot me in the back. I like that. But your individual niceness is inadequate to deal with the brutality and the viciousness of what white body supremacy is doing and has done to my people and to indigenous people. On Saturday, April 10th, I was researching what to do and what to take with us in case things turn violent. Steve and I packed up small kits with first aid supplies, eye drops, extra water in case we were tear gassed. We packed one piece of identification each, and we each took a car key and a small amount of cash. We wrote important phone numbers on our arms with Sharpies in case we were arrested. We were scared, but we both agreed that we would not be able to face ourselves if we did not stand with our neighbors of color as white allies at the Huntington Beach Pier on April 11th. We went. Situations have been changing rapidly around racial justice in our country. We do have some news to be hopeful with the ruling on George Floyd's death this week. We also know that this will be only a beginning for reform. Tragically, the list continues to grow of people shot by law enforcement officers, those sworn to protect and serve. We remember Jimmy Lee Jackson, killed in Selma in 1965, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Daunte Wright, Ma'Khia Bryant, Andrew Brown. Lives lost, families shattered, neighborhoods traumatized. The list continues to grow each week. The events of the Selma civil rights marches, including Bloody Sunday on March 7th, 1965, were broadcast directly into our homes via television. Family members of all ages, I was a small child, watched in horror as peaceful protesters were beaten, attacked by dogs, and tear gassed. I want to hold up UU Viola Liuzzo's Selma experience. Gender exclusion has made the story of Liuzzo less visible. She went not only to protest, but to support the right of African Americans to register to vote. She suffered what has been called a double death. Her murder, and then an orchestrated character assassination by the FBI. Liuzzo's story falls into an intersectionality of a violent murder fueled by racism by the Klan and vicious gender discrimination. In early March of 1965, Dr. King called on people of all faiths to join the march in Selma after African-American son, father, veteran, deacon at his church, and protester, Jimmy Lee Jackson was shot in the stomach by a state trooper. By telling the story of Liuzzo, we do not want to minimize the trauma, the serious and permanent injury that many people suffered during the Selma protests. In addition to Jimmy Lee Jackson and Viola Liuzzo, UU minister Reverend James Reeb was killed. Liuzzo's story, however, holds some particularly sinister twists. The two white UUs knew the risks of traveling south for the protests. They chose to leave their families for what was meant to be just a few days to march for justice. I took this part of their story to heart as I prepared to attend the counter-protest on April 11th as clergy. This necessary work can be dangerous. On the 11th, it turned out I was the only clergy to attend the peaceful 2-hour counter-protest at the Huntington Beach Pier. Both husband in his yellow On the Side of Love t-shirt and I with my yellow stole were very visible. We arrived at 11 a.m. and then left the pier at 1 o'clock, the scheduled time when the KKK rally was supposed to begin, 1 o'clock. The violence you saw on the news happened after the peaceful Black Lives Matter Huntington Beach rally after 1 o'clock p.m. At about 12:45, I offered to give an interfaith blessing to the group. I did so, and then Steve and I left the pier. While we were there, the Black Lives Huntington Beach rally was heckled just a few times by individuals, but no organized group with a plan. I was harassed by one person who got in my face as I was giving the blessing. He had a recording device he was holding like right up in my face. That was all. There was little disruption for 2 hours. Very little was said on the news about the peaceful 2 hours we spent chanting and sharing experiences. Sadly, peace and solidarity don't sell well on the evening news. Many of us in the community worked in different ways to change the narrative of our city that day, and not just at the pier. To go back in time, the aftermath of the Selma marches, James Reeb's story is most often told. He was leaving a restaurant with 2 other UU ministers when a group of Klansmen attacked them. Reeb was hit in the head, and the other 2 UU ministers were beaten. There was difficulty getting him to the hospital, and he died 2 days later, leaving behind a wife and 4 children. Viola Liuzzo was a mother of 5 children and was shot by KKK night riders the evening after the last march. To better understand the story of Liuzzo, 18-year-old Mary Stanton was a television viewer and later a researcher who wrote a book. Horrified, Stanton watched as Liuzzo was first honored as a civil rights martyr, then vilified. In her book, From Selma to Sorrow, The Life and Death of Viola Liuzzo, Stanton describes the first days after the Selma marches. The media took only days to completely transform Viola Liuzzo from a murdered victim to an outside agitator and a symbol of female defiance. The hatred with which people attacked her, white people, especially white women, frightened me. Their anger at her seemed out of proportion to what she'd done. She'd gone on a freedom march, and she'd gotten herself killed. Why was everybody so angry? Stanton asks. What had happened was a layered story of complex women and a horrific miscarriage of justice, that intersectionality of racism and gender. Viola Liuzzo answered the call to Selma in her own way. A strong advocate for racial civil rights, raised as a Catholic, she also belonged to the local UU church. She'd been divorced once and was an independent free thinker. All threats to conservative, middle-class, white America. With 20,000 other peaceful protesters, she responded to Dr. King's call. She and a young African-American man, Leroy Moten, and others were offering rides to those who needed assistance getting home or to the airport after the last march. A car pulled alongside as Liuzzo and Moten were returning to pick up more people, and someone in the pursuing car shot Viola Liuzzo at close range in the head. Moten grabbed the wheel of the car. At the crash site, the men came to check on them, and Moten, covered in Liuzzo's blood, played dead. After the men left, he ran to get help. The story of Liuzzo's murder, while horrible, seemed a straightforward killing by the Klan. Inconsistencies in the police and the FBI reports soon became apparent. The FBI made arrests within hours of the attack. Years later, the Liuzzo children, who you saw in the video, demanded to see the FBI records from their mother's case. And they have pieced together a very different story than the one presented at the trials of the Klansmen from the car. One of the men, Gary Thomas Rowe, was an FBI informer. Rowe had a Klan history prior to his recruitment into the FBI. Rowe claimed that someone else in the car shot Liuzzo. But later on, under oath, the other men swore that Rowe was the person who fired the shots. Immediately after Liuzzo was killed, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover found out that Rowe had warned the FBI of possible violence by these Klansmen, and no one followed up on the tip. Everyone under oath threw everyone else under the bus in the cover-up incompetence, which led to Viola Liuzzo's death. Hoover protected the FBI involvement in deadly mistakes by intentionally smearing Viola's character and leaking lies to the press and to the Klan. In a matter of days, Viola Liuzzo was transformed from a dedicated civil rights activist into a depraved drug addict who deserted her children and husband to have sex with African-American men. 19-year-old activist Leroy Moten was also victimized by the hypersexualization and slanderous assumptions. Already traumatized, Moten was repeatedly accused and implicated as her lover. Her autopsy, which proved none of these things had happened, was discounted. The press dragged her name through the muck. This was all instigated at the top level of the FBI by Hoover. Her Beret family was tormented and harassed. The Southern press was merciless to her memory. Once again, a woman had been asking for it. The local sheriff of Selma was criticized for not acting on the tip that a car full of Klansmen was planning trouble that night. The sheriff blamed the FBI, but he also said that, like Liuzzo, he had 5 children, but on that night, his wife was home with their children, at home where she belonged. Quote, Viola Liuzzo was called a race traitor. In the wake of the smear campaign, a Klan cross was burned in front of the Liuzzo home in Detroit, and her children were harassed at school. When I saw the interviews with the Liuzzo family adult children, I was transfixed. They seem not only to have survived, but be thriving. Mary mentions in the interview that we saw that she's had a wonderful life. It begs the question, how do we get past horrible trauma? Should we get past horrible trauma? I believe that for our own sakes, a radical acceptance of what has happened is necessary to move forward. Some folks offer forgiveness, but for me, as I struggle with acts of evil in the world, a simple acceptance of what happened and then a plan to move forward in a healthy way, based on my own Buddhist background, is the best path. In listening to the recordings of Liuzzo's children, and there are many other interviews out there, and they've been on their own journey, I hear a respect for our UU principles, the interdependent web of life, and the inherent worth and dignity of each person. The Liuzzo siblings made a choice to find out the truth about their mother, no matter how painful, accept that truth and then proclaim it. They chose to move forward and actively reclaim their mother's memory with all its beauty and very human, multi-layered complexity. I find myself inspired by their own down-to-earth acceptance of the past, their generosity of spirit combined with their activism. It's a rare combination. Having myself recently stepped up to the call of direct action in this way and been criticized directly and indirectly for taking action in the face of racism, I better understand why Martin Luther King wrote these words. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the White Citizens Council or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. Now, paradoxically, once I stood on Huntington Beach Pier with Black Lives Matter Huntington Beach and their allies, I felt very safe. Getting back and forth, walking back and forth, I felt much more nervous and concerned for my own safety. With the SWAT team very close by, however, I could see that violence could happen in a moment. But the dedication of the people around me held me as a fragile individual in solidarity with many others that day, people of all colors. My fear dissipated. Dismantling racism is not an easy task. For many, the deaths of Liuzzo and Reeb continue to unfairly overshadow the struggles and voices of African Americans. What are the years of cruelty, brutality, and murder that African Americans and people of color continue to experience in this country? I ask that the work we are doing today with those here who are directly experiencing racial oppression and as your allies, bring about real change. At Reverend Reeb's memorial, Dr. King eulogized in the following words. So in his death, James Reeb says something to each of us, black and white alike, says that we must substitute courage for caution, says to us we must be concerned not merely about who murdered him, but about the system, the way of life, the philosophy that produced the murder. His death says to us that we must work passionately and unrelentingly to make the American dream a reality. So he did not die in vain. We live in a time when invitations to a Ku Klux Klan rally are dropped on local doorsteps. If you are a white ally, the way to honor the memory of all who have died because of racial justice in this country is to stand courageously, because our time is now. Direct action will translate differently for each of us. If we are a white ally, we can deeply listen to our BIPOC friends and neighbors. We must work together to demand that police training move from an adversarial military style to community building with mandatory violence de-escalation training. We must demand access to voting rights for all. As Dr. King said, we need to address the system, the way of life, the philosophy. Our system has produced a deadly brokenness. Our actions now can change that system so we can honor, hold up, celebrate, and respect the very best in ourselves and all our siblings on this crowded, complex, broken, and beautiful earth. May it be so. Amen, shalom, salam, namaste, and blessed be.
Thank you, Reverend Rayna. So much to think about. And for everyone, please save your questions and comments for the virtual cafe after the service. It was very powerful. We now have our closing hymn, number 1017, Building a New Way.
Hello again. Let's all sing together, Building a New Way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. Feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are walking to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed out every need. We can feed out every need. We can feed out every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed out every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without peace, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry.
Thank you for the wonderful music today.
Hello again. Let's all.
Okay, we extinguish our chalice, but its light lives on in the minds and hearts and soul of each one of you. Carry that flame as you leave this place and share it with those you know. with those you love, and most especially with those you have yet to meet. Our benediction closing words today are from Reverend Tandeka, and I'm a huge fan, as I know Reverend Lee Marie is too, of Reverend Tandeka. Despair is my private pain, born from what I have failed to say, failed to do, failed to overcome. Be still, my inner self. Let me rise to you. Let me reach down into your pain and soothe you. I turn to you to renew my life. I turn to the world, the streets of the city, the worn tapestries of brokerage firms, crack dealers, private estates, personal things in the bag lady's cart. Rage and pain in the faces that turn to me, afraid of their own inner worlds. This common world I love anew as the lifeblood of generations who refuse to surrender their humanity in an inhumane world, courses through my veins. From it, within this world, my despair is transformed to hope, and I begin anew the legacy of caring. Blessed be.
Thank you, Reverend Rayna. We will now join our hearts, but not our voices, for our closing song. And again, please stick around for after the service for our virtual cafe with Reverend Rayna. Our closing song, Let There Be Peace on Earth.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With earth as our mother, we are family. Let us walk with each other, perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my song about to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth. Let it begin with me. And have a wonderful day.
The virtual cafe is now open. You guys can all unmute yourselves.